can I get a pen? I'm making a note of how many times you say "and that" during today's show.
Slow start and that. Big list and that. Nice bit of veg and that. Just a shirt and that. Quotes and that. Rich family and that. She's quite odd looking and that. Couple of barm cakes and that. You know, all healthy and that. I'm always busy doing stuff and that. Players and that. Oh, who's going to win this and that? We're having a go and that. People who annoy you and that. It's a good story and that. Good looking and that. Little invention she's come up with and that. Playing with the dog and that. This dog's rubbish and that. Marks and Spencers and that. Comes through us and that. Being honest and that. It was weird and that. Joined the circus and that. When he was at war and that. You know, I put in all these hours and that. He's having a great time and that. You know, she's daft and that. Bags of potatoes and that. I didn't do that well at school and that. Toes and that. Time and that. On the news and that. What's gone on in the world and that. Time and that. Talk about what you're watching. And that. Drums and that. When you're in the younger year and that. Police and that. Yeah. Late at night and that. Good food and that. And chasing cars and that. Yeah, modern world and that. Bones and that. Playing swing ball and that. Ponds and that. With hot weather comes with spiders and that. Bread and that. Earning money and that. Telly and that. Gays and that. You had the girls in and that. Not really washing up and that. Stuff that's on the telly and that. Have a wash and that. Fag packets and that. Tracksuits and that. Not nice for the animals and that. Born and that. Little fat baby and that. Bit sad and that. EastEnders and that. Funny food and that. Sick of listening to the adverts and that. She had a problem with a marrow. And that. With a marrow and that. I don't know what it means when you got a problem with a marrow and that. How things were going and that. Blokes who go nude for modelling and that. Aged fast and that. Stress and that. The headlines and that. Going normal and that. In jungles and that. Energy and that. And making a mess and that. Arrested and that. You know, it normally swings on its little perch and that. Somewhere to live. And that, talking to experts and that, insects and that, dark and that, too many animals to look after and that, I don't know what she's been up to and that, attacked by a little monkey and that, on my neck and that, fat fish and that, pushing him about and that, properly done and that, backfires and that, bad news and that, field and that, table tennis and that, table tennis and that, really enjoyed it and that, been away with my mum and dad and that, computers and that, when he was a kid and that, still needs a walk and that, diaries and that, iPods and that, cryptic clues and that, clapped for her and that, bought a bed off you con me and that, glasses and that, acorns and that, books and that, explain it and that, take part and that, about animals and that, a surprise and that, bought some April fruits and that, because it's not good and that, Jack Nicholson and that, keep you uppies and that, on the internet and that, website and that, don't mess with your body and that, doing stuff for this show and that, drying your pots and that, it'd be really slippery and that, you know, when friends come round and that, come out and that, not used to the cold weather and that, it's really airy and that, day off and that, pedalling and that, knows the route and that, you know, they're getting on well and that, brandy and that, bring some home and that, take your clothes off and that, strip her down and that, jellyfish and that, cryptic clover band and that, drink and that, pen and paper and that, opening jam jars and that, being cruel to animals and that, listen to the radio and that, the shave and that, fuss and that, too big and that, mad times and that, nice food and that, shells and that, qualifications bit and that, feel as free as a woman down below and that, having a wig and that, still none the wiser and that, one of my dad's mates and that, you know, work and that, bright and that, really bright and that, keep it in shape and that, you wouldn't believe out the likeness and that, you can't buy him and that, the ground and that, have a chat and that, hard and that, but he didn't want to go off his dad's name and that, they didn't have cars and that, breakfast, do it and that, stood there and that, have some good sort of wedding pictures done and that, like a full week and that, blown into the road and that, presents and that, there's been a lot of stuff going on and that, the woods and that, tight space and that, his wife passed away and that, going on the web and that, send him through there and that, she didn't like him and that, the volcanoes and that, the swimming pool and that, relax and that, the volcanoes and that, still, you know, making half the effort and that, back in time and that, live there and that, it's an healthy place to go when you get older and that, Anderson shelters and that, the way they act and that, the meat tree and that, they're happy and that, shortbread biscuits and that, Jane and that, BBC and that, drinks and that, people and that, parents and that, villa and that, have a shower and that, play CDs and that, but it's looking a bit sad and that, listen carefully and that, in the week and that, do you want some money and that, true stories and that, castles and that, that's safe and that, rides and that, loads of emails and that, we're happy and that, proper makeup and that, they sleep for 13 years, some of them, and that, giving yours a stroke on the head and that, not well and that, bit bunged up and that, calling up to let you know I was alright and that, wearing trousers and that, don't want to upset people and that, not their hair being a mess and that, the streets and that, famine and that, gay people and that, we're chatting, we're having a chat and that, there's a lot of right answers and that, they've got weak hearts and that, haven't they? Really? Yeah, but you're with them all day and that, different. Yeah. And that, little gay fellas and that, have a chat and that, they look after themselves and that, just because that's the way I have to go, not because of you know what I mean? I wasn't going there on that farm and that, just a line and that, buildings and that, 4 years and that, favourite food and that, Chinese and that, stuff and that, email in and that, email and that, post and that, sharks and that, play some ads and that, sound effects and that, gets done and that, sleep around and that, ideas and that, spirits and that, you know, he's trying and that, good ideas and that, chatting to his girlfriend and that, you know, you've had ghosts in your house and that, saying I'm daft and that, Formula 1 and that. Where the secret and that, holiday and that, half and half and that. They save you and that, travelling and that, need help and that, crowds and that, dancing and that, put your address on there as well and that. 3 rabbits and that, a little bit lucky and that, playing soil and that, hickory dickory dock and that, hickory dickory dock and that, big heads and that, war and that, like your Richard Bransons and that, dinosaurs and that, Father's Day and that, for good headlines and that, Dali and that, going on and that, picking up the ladies and that. Apparently they get you and then they beat you up and that, leaving rubbish up there and that, cure and that, all the racket and that. Why do you think it happened and that? He gets his own back on the Jewish people and that, good life and that. All the problems Africa's got and that, making teeth and that. He was hung and that, and he leaves me alone and that, good shape and that, having a laugh and that, web dams and that, ladder 49 and that, counted how many fish are in the sea and that,
No.
holiday programmes and that, yourself and that, no water and that, good time and that, set your dog a walk and that, diseased and that, we'll have a drink and that, videotapes and that, I'm sorting all my files out and that, you look after it and that, getting the key in and that, commands and that, small places and that, you know, watching the news and that, injuries and that, little fat kid and that, Channel 4 and that, wizards and that, got some stuff there and that, chat rooms and that, meeting people and that, you know, what the show's about and that. Back then, it wasn't about getting results and that. I hung up the phone and that, loads of feet and that, they don't know where they're going and that, chat with mates and that, I'm on my way home from the show and that, and an hour and that, slurping and that, stunk of diesel and that, petrol fumes and that, birthdays and that, stuff that I can't relate to and that. We had our dinner and that, deliver a baby and that, 3-piece suite, and a telly and that.
Telling you that!
Natural and that, guns and that, cope with it and that. Do you feel alright and that? Left it off all day and that, getting mates and that, films and that, get some bits done and that. Me grifter tyres and that, plumbing and that, fire engines and that. And her head was all a bit mangled and messy and that, tube lights and that. A D and a couple of C's and that, chop them up and that. Pictures and that, don't take this the wrong way and that.
Do this one,
been out on a day and that.
Yeah.
Gay fellas and that. Gay and that. Parents and that. Young and that. Drinking and that. Getting into trouble and that. Bodily functions and that. Probably no teeth. That, nappy and that. Just me in a film and that. All sort of greased up and that. What he'd handed me and that. I don't want to use this as, like, moaning time and that, because I don't like to moan, I'm busy and that. Sleeping and that. Bit of a chat with him and that. So I went to church with him and that. Places to live and that. You know, going on the internet and that. Ghouls and that. We're going for packet flags in a tank and that, come round and that, coming along and that, great time and that, mosaics and that, birthday cards and that, funeral cards and that, you know, go and unpack your bags and that, wolves and that, having loads of mates and that, traffic and that, fag and that, depressed and that, mates and that, having a swim and that, when you get your clothes on and that, blow around you and that, South Africa in and that, nudists and that, the weather and that, gotta be out to have a shower and that, fed up and that, the news and that, Pope and that, telly and that, magazines and that, science and that, bit strange and that, lad with 3 legs and that, go out and get some food and that, the mum died and the dad died and that, wolves and that, radio and that, old people and that, TV programmes and that, cavemen and that, back and that, cavemen in front of dinosaurs and that, try to take over countries and that, had a lovely meal and that, now round it isn't that, animals and that, sharing lunch and that, dinosaurs and that, learn by your mistakes and that, ridiculous and that, I like, you know, going out for food and that, phone banks and that, Eric and Ernie and that, you know, you could have the operation done and that, pretty old when you're younger and that, you used to always wear a suit and that, tough day at work and that, little head and that, having a good time and that, bath and that, giving the water and that, people hassling you and that, got some good prizes today and that, all that talk and that, scorpions and that, little animals and that, flats and that, emailing and that, sex and that, be careful and that, and his eyes and that, picking tea and that, gay district of London and that, telly and that, every town and that, funny colour and that, crackly and that, asthma and that, talk and that, speak and that, doing hymns and that, bad and that, taking over and that, Trisha and that, it's got loads of ink in it and that, give it a good shot and that, knocking and that, come out to play and that, players and that, game and that, caffeine and that, English army people and that, walk and that, in Britain and that, the Loch Ness Monster and that, his teeth are nice and clean again because he could brush them and that, problems and that, look after it and that, take it for a ride and that, been messing about and that, talking and that, after like the devil had got in him and that, the Smarties and that, his head's all, you know, messed up and that. Surprises on your birthday and that, today's the day and that, upstairs and that. Moving into this house and that, we get on each other's nerves and that. You know, it sounds good, but I've never used it and that. Like EastEnders and that, I wasn't looking at it and that. Busy and that, amazing and that. Good topics and that, long words and that, no knickers and that. Grassfield in Edinburgh and that. Hot dog stands and that, pockets and that. What your job is and that, cooking and that. You don't want people
knowing what you
I look like and that, friends and family and that, Pete the Great and that, good tunes and that, he had some money and that, got my own little room and that, body and that, families and that, the art's good and that, technology and that, DVDs and that, sheep and that, listen and that, talk and that, proud and that, can't just sit here and take it and that, husband of one and that, I'm happy and that, jobs and that, cryptic clues and that, the new bands and that, some older bands and that, tables and that, when I see homeless people and that, supermarkets and that, awake and that, what can I do in that, cavemen and that, change the rope and that, lipstick and that.
Do monkey
Playing
news!
robbers and that. Healthy and that. I'm happy and that. I'm not happy and that. Fed up and that. A new coat and that. The new coat and that. Watch the telly and that. Toolbox and that. Panicking and that. Working there and that. Leeches and that. Fish and that. His ways and that. Nude and that. Wizards and that. People and that. Change and that. It starts off well and that. Papers and that. Wife and that. Getting in late and that. Test tube babies and that. Same sort of lines and that. Slag me off and that. In time with the music and that. Stumps and that. Chimps, you know, they dear and that. Feeling hot and that. Doing the other job and that. Kiss and that. They can hold their hand and that. Bit dear and that. It's just headlines and that. Big words and that. Bit little nice and that. Clues and that. And sex and that. Pushing them around and that. Keeps you fit and that. Suggestions and that. Nice new blocks of flats to live in and that. Can you have a sex change done on the NHS and that? Taking your clothes off and that. Small throat and that. When you're like 12 and that. Meet her and marry her and that. Is really weak and that. Aliens and that. Numbers and that. Ill in bed and that. Planes and that. You got nice toes and that. Chucking money away. And that, stress her out at work and that, war and that, tired and that, mates and that, screaming a little bit and that, when are we going to get married and that, ghosts and that, different types and that, drink beer and that, tired legs up and that, problems on planes and that, have a good Christmas and that, we're in a line and that, bad eyes and that, you know, you have a laugh and that, in the jungle and that, ready for people to move in and that, do a bit of trickery and that, numbers and that, new features and that, here's the clues and that, first one. And that. Toilet and that. Big ears and that. See the trains coming and that. Sony Awards and that. Right, welcome to the show and that. You know, with meeting and that. Animals and that. Ghosts and that. String fellas and that. Being nude and that. Screaming and that. You know, if they get bored, they move on. And that. Female in your address and that. Better chance of winning and that. World records and that. Eating watches and that. Anti-to-do-do-do-do and that. Work to do and that. Christmas mood and that. And win some stuff and that. Selling newspapers and that. Weird stuff. And that. What's going on in that? It's some stuff we like and that. You need food and that. You're hungry and that. Make it tighter and that. Operations and that. Win for 5 minutes and that. Kids and that. Playing in the sea and that. You can see the balloon and that. It's raining and that. Papers and that. I know which ones they like and that. Suzanne's hair and that. And Robin and that. Sorting the shower out and that. Two worlds and that. But when you look in the mirror and that. Wedding dress and that. Shows and that. Try and save the world and that. Clothes and that. Educating people and that. A grown man and that. How much it costs to get a monkey and that. Loads of kids with balloons and that. Well done and that. Got results and that. Once you got it caught, didn't like it and that. Sunday and that. Go for a walk there and that, messing about and that, sperm and that, linked and that, pictures and that, more time on her hands now and that, the nudes and that, a vicar and that, the nuts out and that, tricks and that, nudists and that, good and that, that.